Hey y'all, Craig here from Subtle Energy Mechanics. Welcome to my page, or welcome back if you've been here before. Today, I want to share a story about a kid that I worked with who, um, beautiful boy, about 10 years old. His mom um, was just, well, he was just given a diagnosis of Tourette's, and his mom was looking for answers. She was just looking for answers in ways that she can help her boy. So somehow she came across my name and she came over and I met this kid and we just hung out for a bit and was out here on this big farm and just was watching him just be fascinated with the big tools and the tractors and the animals and things um and part of what I noticed, because I don't work as a doctor, and so I don't look through the lens of diagnosis in the way that we doctors are trained. So um, the lens that I've found far more helpful to me from my own life and my own traumas and my own trying to figure out where I am on a given day in terms of how my nervous system is feeling. Am I feeling okay? Am I feeling excited? Am I feeling um attacked on the inside or anxious or watching myself behaving in a way that's like, this isn't how I want to be, trying to figure out that, and then how to get from wherever I am into a good day, into a life that feels like, oh, this is why I'm here. So I look at it, and for me, the best way to, as I talk about on this channel, is using some of the tools that I borrowed from my yoga training. And these tools or models or maps, compass around how energy and consciousness work in this energetic and conscious thing, and how that energy and consciousness responds when we've had a scare, when we've had a trauma, how the nervous system reorganizes itself when there's a real big fear, scare, like one big one, or in the case of complex PTSD, where there's life every single day isn't safe or is overwhelming and it's just predictable that way. The nervous system, of course, is always learning and it changes, it remodels itself on the inside to figure out how to adapt to life. And in my experience, I've found that using some of these yogic energetic models as a map to figure out what's going on gives me it's a better map because I use that map to then interact with myself or interact with my clients or my yes. And in those interactions, using these yogic energetic models in the interactions seems to produce over and over again, sometimes these miraculous changes, seemingly miraculous changes, relative to what some of the other options are out there. And again, not diagnosing nor treating, not playing doctor. So nothing you hear on this channel should ever be used as medical advice or medical to inform your medical decisions, right? This is new age, neoliberal, fictional nonsense entertainment, energetic entertainment. So back to the story. As I'm watching this kid, I'm seeing I'm seeing how he's moving energy and information through his body, because that's what it does. We move energy and information through the body so we can make it through the moment and make it to the next moment and the next throughout the day and the next day. Part of what I'm watching is these behaviors that are spontaneous, sporadic, and um, and seem to be not what you would expect to see within a relaxed individual walking around a farm, right? He's doing stuff like this and this shrugging, and the spontaneous shrugging as though he's got some kind of painful or irritating grip in his system, and he's like trying to cast it off. And it's just spontaneously, the body spontaneously reacting to this thing and shooting it off. What I'm watching is with a bit of energetic anatomy that I know, how energy should be moving in a body and up and down through a nervous system, up and down through the main channel of the nervous system, which in the yogic world is called Sushumna, and that's right about where the spinal cord is. Now, when the energy is moving, that Sushumna, as you may know, moves fluidly, and the breath goes along with it, and movement goes along with it, so that the spine can always be supple and responsive. Literally is the backbone for our posture and how we orient ourselves to life and things coming to us in life. But something was going on with how this kid was managing this stuff. And a little bit of background with just sharing what was shared with me about this kid is the parents were not together. Dad had struggled or was struggling, had struggled, and I don't know many of the particulars, but I know there was some substance abuse, maybe some addiction challenges. And again, I don't know his story, but what I do know is that there were some struggles in life that really had impacted him and his health. And so what my imagination says is that's impacting him and his health, and then how he actually energetically shows up in the moment. What does that look like? And from a kosha point of view, and the kosha's meaning, when we look at energy as it's moving through the body, that energy in like one flowing river. We'll say there's a flowing river up and down through the spinal cord. And when that river is coordinated, that river is made up of 5 different frequencies that all blend together or are woven together. And when they're woven together, the behavior of that energy makes this wave. And that's what the physical expression is. But what the internal experience is of me, maybe you, this kid and his parents, is that first kosha carries with it safety. That's the internal experience of safety, contentment, ease. And that's the kosha that then back to behavior. So that's the internal perception, but there's also a behavior of these koshas. The behavior of the koshas, that one moves with breath, and the breath needs to move all the way up and down through the entire spinal cord. So now we're getting into how would we watch ourselves or maybe our loved ones to show us, like, is the energy moving in a particular way? Is that first kosha? Is that safety moving through? That says safety in case you can't read it. Is the entire organism really feeling safe? And that's what we would watch for. Behaviorally, does the breath moving up and down through the spine? Second kosha is our emotion, energy in motion. It starts to move. We start to stretch. And you've watched my other videos, you know that, like, when you're yawning, this is a second kosha expression. It's just energy moving through the tissues and stretching. Now we can take that to our interactions. Right? When we go see a movie that we love or a band that we love, we go because of some of the emotional experience, and we love that emotional experience. And part of how we love it is we feel safe. We feel safe in that container where the band is playing. We feel safe, and as long as we're feeling safe, we can run that emotion, and it is pure delight. Right? It's just pure delight to run that emotion. Now, take yourself or this kid that I've been working with, or was looking at working with, and put him in an experience where he's interacting with somebody, where there's emotion moving, but it doesn't feel safe. There's emotion moving. We want to connect, especially if it's with one of our parents. We need to connect with one of our parents or one of our caregivers. And so how do we connect? We merge experience. We both run emotion through us. And while we're doing that together, there's this experience of connection. But if something feels off, if something feels dangerous, if some part of our highly sensitive or empathic self feels into this exchange between the two of us and feels that like dad or mom, they've got something going on in the background where they haven't worked out their own trauma yet. There's going to be this sense of like not quite safe there. So our body is going to need that connection still, because it's what we need to survive. But this first kosha, when there's no safety, is right alongside second kosha. They go together, because second kosha stretches up, and that first kosha that breath needs to go right along with all of the tissues in that emotional experience and can bring it down so that we can stay content and experience. We can stop in the moment at any point. We can stop the moment, sit back, and feel and know where we are, who we are, what we are. That's what that first kosha does. It just allows me to feel right now where I am, who I am, and am I safe? When I'm interacting with somebody as a kid and there's something that's off, something my parent hasn't really dealt with, and there's some trauma in my parent, but I still need to connect to my parent, this first kosha splits off from the second kosha. So now these two are not connected. So this is first kosha has now split off from the second kosha. So, and I'll make a series of these things, because this is where some of the beautiful complexity and of how the nervous system reorganizes, adapts itself to be able to meet our needs, that emotional connection, the physical connection, in a less than optimal or maybe dangerous experience. So first kosha, now when it splits off, now what happens? We freeze, because the breath now no longer is coming through the entire spine and spinal cord and system. And by extension, if it's not coming through the entire spine, it's not then coming out all of the nerves that go to all of the organs. So now we don't actually have full relaxation, full feeling going to all of the organs. And there's maybe a correlation, hypothetical, imaginary correlation between people that may develop some kind of chronic issues long-term in their health when there's been some kind of consistent lack of safety in childhood, because these two energetic koshas have split. But notice that now we have the first kosha, now this is the third one, and the fourth one, and the fifth one. So the first one is that safety, and the second one is emotion, and the third one is, as our human self developed, continuing to evolve into this, whatever this is that we are, that includes the ability to think. That's what this third kosha is starting to figure out how to think our way through the day. It's a more complex vibration of energy that actually creates the experience of thought and moving pictures around, and then listening to our second kosha response to each of these pictures and going, yes, I like that. I'm going to emotionally move towards that. I'm going to emotionally move away from that. So notice how that's how second and third kosha interact with each other. We have emotional responses to images. And then the mind actually evolved one layer further to the fourth kosha. So this is 3, here's 4. 4 is bigger picture. The bigger picture of, this is where I want to go. This is how I want to feel. This is actually the mind, us mapping out a future where we can really start to feel amazing levels of emotional response with some of these images. So it allows us to really start to utilize our imagination, watch our emotional response to these pictures, and then start to, with our third kosha, start to develop a map, a strategy, a tactics for getting from here to there, because that's the life that we want. But then what about this one down here, this first kosha? Right? If that splits off because it's on alert, part of us freezes, and that's the core of that fight, flight, freeze. The freeze component of that trauma response. And notice that none of this is caused by other people. It's how our nervous system is appropriately adapting to get what it needs in life. Which on the one hand, we go, oh, is this my fault? Did I do this to myself? It's actually, I didn't opt to be in this dangerous situation. I didn't opt for these things to happen to me. True. Fortunately, hopefully for you, that those situations are mostly done, mostly gone. And so what the good news is here is if the nervous system is reorganized itself once, then maybe if you're doing it all inside yourself, then you're at home with the possibility of starting to play with how can I do things with my perception, my posture, maybe my breathing, maybe my interactions with others, to figure out what's the game of reorganizing these things. So I'll pause with this one for a second. So then back to looking at the kiddo, who again had been just given a diagnosis of Tourette's, and I think his mom was maybe questioning the diagnosis or questioning the potential outcomes of what benefit would there be in addition to having the diagnosis of Tourette's treated in the way that was prescribed. Are there other options that she can support her boy? Right. And so we talked about what this looks like with him. And so she and I just watched. And what I was pointing out was when the first kosha is then kind of brought, so first, one, second, third, fourth, fifth. When it's brought back in line, I'm okay. Well, let's make this one the first because I can't keep my pinky out. Maybe I can. Anyway, when that first kosha is split off energetically, look at what the behavior is going to look like. Because that first kosha, when the first kosha now mixes with the third, so the second kosha, we talked about that. The second kosha is the stretching, and then the first kosha comes in and it brings everything down. The behavior of the third kosha is this oscillation or spatio-temporal, temporal-spatial, I always flip those two around, rhythm. And notice what this is. This looks kind of like a stim, doesn't it? You know, if in autistic world, that's stimming, which is what the nervous system needs to do to regulate itself rhythmically and tactically throughout the day and in the moment. And that's what this one is, this third kosha. And so now when you're watching behavior, are we watching a stim? Are we watching energy just trying to be dissipated? Or are we actually watching the central nervous system trying to integrate what's happening in the world into a rhythmic, ordered narrative so that we can feel and see what's happening, and then have a plan for moving forward. And as that energy then moves up through the spine, if now we have an experience in our body where we've been panicked, what do? We tuck head, tuck tail, just like a dog does when it's scared. It goes, right? So that's that fight, flight, freeze response. The freeze response when we take this first kosha away because there's no longer safety moving through the entire body. The body gets overwhelmed. It wants to stop something. And so it tries to stop everything because it can't fully get what's happening. So we try to freeze what's happening. We freeze ourselves and everything else, trying to slow it down so we can figure out how do I get through it. What that does is when we tuck forward, energy then energy then's moving up to the spine, but when we tuck it forward, it can't make it all the way to the top, to the brain. So it splits off and it goes down one arm or it goes down the other arm and it gets stuck in the spine. Now, as mom and I were watching her son, what we're watching is this and this and this and this. If there's energy stuck in your or this kid's spinal cord or his body just trying to figure out how to process life without getting overwhelmed, but he's got a particular fear in there that hasn't been fully felt and fully processed, this is going to happen. So what's going to happen is the energy of life still needs to be processed right now, still needs to be felt, still needs to be, because life keeps coming, right? And so it keeps coming in. There's energy sensation, there's information that needs to come up through the spine. And what happens is he's now, like, we're not dealing with Tourette's, we're not dealing with diagnosis, we're not dealing with any of that stuff. We're dealing with a human trying to be human in a world and feel and think and feel safe. And what we're watching for is the energy, is the experience of safety and emotion and thought all working together. So he can soften, receive, feel, move towards what he wants, move away from what he doesn't want, and then have a mental plan to start to figure this out, to map his own world for himself now and into the future. And doing this and this and this. And so his mom and I were talking about this. It's like, look what's happening. He's is that like, is that a tick? Is that a stem? Is that a what, you know, what if we don't name it anything? But if we look at what we want to see is a process of energy and information moving all the way up through spine, and what he's doing is it's getting up to about here, and watch what he's doing. He knows that there's a block in there, a block of energy and information, truth coming up through him, and it's not making it through. So he's trying to fix the problem on the inside by doing this. He's trying to find what's going on in the background of his own processing organ, his organ of inner knowing. So he knows what's happened. He knows that's what I call the spinal cord, and it's that organ of inner knowing, because that's the experience. He's trying to figure out how can he get to his own inner knowing. So from the yogic point of view, the safety, and one other point with like interacting with, say, his father, if his father had trauma, his father likely then was disconnecting safety from his emotional experience, disconnecting safety from his mental experience. The pain, his father, like maybe living a life, coming towards the end of his life, knowing that he didn't get this fundamental thing about his humanness worked out. And so maybe an extreme grief, an extreme pain, an extreme rage, an extreme emotion, and mental picture and story about who he is, what the world is, that goes along with that, goes along with his experience. Yet his kid who wants to love him, connect with him and connect and feel together, but doesn't feel safe doing that. So now safety doesn't connect. That first kosha doesn't connect with the third, which is the mental. Like he can't feel safe while he's engaging with dad's narrative. He can't feel safe while engaging with dad's view of the future. And he can't feel safe while he's feeling into that, the fifth, the bliss, the soul kosha, which is just this open hearted transmission of divine woo-woo-ness coming through you. And so we're watching, in my imagination, we're watching a kid who can't feel safe while he's been interacting with one of his primary caregivers, his parents, his dad, and has learned to interact with them, but can't be safe. And so we have a body that's not feeling safe, but trying to feel and to think, and trying to figure out how to get this back. So if that's actually what's happening, then what can we do? Well, sticking with the yogic model, there's the yogic model has these things called bandhas, which are called energy locks. And the energy locks are in the neck. The primary ones are in the neck. That's the most primary one. And then there's another one down the tailbone. There's a couple others. But the ones that I want to talk about are the one in the neck primarily. And because look at what he was doing. Okay. Neck. And he's trying to do something in his upper back. So he's trying to figure out something in here that he's realizing is causing him some on the inside and some up here in his head. Emotional, maybe there's ADHD, maybe there's other personality things, these comorbidities, these other diagnostic expressions that are telling people that something's off on the inside. So if we take all of those away and we just look at how do we help these energies come back together and then see what life looks like so that see if we can just feel safe. So if he has Tourette's, if he has any of these other diagnoses, can he feel safe in that? And when he can feel safe in that, then he can feel safe in whatever he's designed to be. His art, he can bring his art to the world and his unique vision of what's happening in this world and contribute that to the rest of us. With diagnosis, without diagnosis, whatever that is. But we want to help with the trauma that was happening while he was interacting with, I don't know whether it was dad or whatever else happened with his life. I don't care so much about what actually happened, but what's happening right now. As Gabor Mate says, the trauma is not what happened, it's what your nervous system is doing in response to what happened. And his nervous system, in my imaginary world, this kid's nervous system had reorganized itself to be able to get the most out of life and still protect himself by splitting off this first kosha and disconnecting safety from emotion, from some of the mental capacities, the thoughts. So now to the bandha up here is called an energy lock. And I'm going to take some creative license here in discussing those because it's a little bit different than how some of the books talk about them in yoga. So I like to look at the energy lock as kind of like a padlock, and a padlock has a sequence, right? A little bit this way, a little bit this way, a little bit this way, which actually helps the nervous system to reorganize the koshas so that ideally that first kosha can start to weave with the second one. So the second one is the stretch, emotion charge. And if you stay emotionally charged, you're going to be triggered. You're going to have to like bring it down. You're going to have to take a Xanax. You're going to have to take these downers because you're stuck up. You're stuck high. You're stuck activated. You're stuck vigilant. You're hyper vigilant. That's what happens when the second kosha is jacked up and it can't be brought back down because the first kosha is no longer connected to it. The first kosha has to bring it down, has to bring it back into the moment. And this can all be done by, I mean, depending on who you may be working with. And I feel my shameless plug coming here. Warning, shameless plug. This is what I do now for a living. I work with others to help them reorganize their koshas. So if there's a traumatized system experience in there, is there a way that between the two of us and in our consciousness, and whether I do most of this work with folks over Zoom, to see if we can help to reorganize your koshic internal energetic experience so that safety is brought into the thoughts, is brought into the emotions, so that energy and information flows as it's designed to, up and down through that main energetic imaginary channel that happens to go right alongside the spinal cord. And if there is kind of a correlation between this energy and the spinal cord, and you look at what the spinal cord does, where is that map I have? I've lost my map, which is ironical, isn't it? The spinal cord actually is that lower part of the brain that then branches off and sends life juice to all of our organs. And if the life juice flow is off, if the life juice flows too much or too little, all of the organs or those organs that are being served by your nervous system aren't going to work right. So you're gonna start to compound these problems. And this is how trauma early on can cause so many diagnostic problems that later on. And this is how we can address some type of the energetic piece of the complex PTSD response. That's that freeze that splits off the first kosha. And as we reconnect that first kosha to the third, this rhythmic thing doesn't get shot out the arms, but may still need to stim. The body still needs to regulate rhythmically, spatiotemporally, but it can do it if it wants to in a dance way here, in a play way here, but we can also do it in the spinal cord. So we become much more adaptive in our ability to regulate and organize sequences and thoughts and visions. And that's what it looks like when the first kosha starts to come back into combination with the third one. And then the fourth one actually is now there's a more complex when safety comes into and integrates with the fourth kosha, the heart actually starts to open. So now we're actually looking at a spiritual or metaphysical experience, but this is the mathematics of how to reproduce that heart opening metaphysical experience. So now we're actually moving from body safety into emotion into mental and now into more of a spiritual experience, because what's really happening here in the moment, like what really is happening here, what really are we? And then safety all the way to this fifth kosha. And the only thing I'm going to say about that is this bliss thing. When I hear the words like fear of God, and people are like, why would you fear God? You my imagination says, unless that first kosha, that ability to actually receive openly and feel safe in experience, as that bliss experience is coming through, if I don't feel safe and you have that glimmer of the size, the magnitude of the intelligence behind the veil, you just get blown apart. So it can be a tremendously capital FEAR fear experience. Anybody who's taken, I'll say DMT for that matter, or maybe any other psychedelics know that it is oftentimes a very scary experience. So back to the story with the kid, and we'll finish up here. Yeah, so we did a little bit of, there was no treatment for anything. There was nothing wrong with the kid's neck, but we actually looked at how can we help to bring the first kosha, work with him for about 10 minutes. And according to mom, now we're over a year, 2 years later, and what they were calling these Tourette's expressions, symptoms, I think are 90% gone and continue to be. And that was after the first session. And does this happen with everybody? Absolutely not. Right? I'm sharing some of the stories that were miracle stories, and people are more complex. Oftentimes kids can be really resilient. So I want to be reality based here and not necessarily Disney based. But some of the results are kind of Disney worthy. So this is why I like to look at people and myself with this through a non-pathological lens, but through this yogic lens, because you have to compare the results. And the results for me are more exciting when I look at them through this yogic lens. Yeah. So if this feels like something that's going on, with you or somebody that you love, I'd recommend somebody that is familiar with the yogic tool set, whether it's koshas or bandhas, and talking to them about how is it they are putting together the narrative of of the world. So if you'd like to investigate what it looks like to work with me, or at least interact, have a conversation with me about whether or not it might be appropriate to work together, I've got information in the description down below. shoot me an email. Happy to connect. So thanks everybody for taking your time. See you on the next one.